Okay guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm dressed up a little bit tonight because I filmed recently a Zoom with Gilbert Yeung, which is the focus of today's video, and you can jump ahead if you want to just get straight to that. But he outdid me in the outfit for the Zoom, so I had to, at least for the intro of this video, step it up a little bit. But been so swamped and also been sick, so that's partly why that Zoom, I was just under the weather. But he carried the day, not only with outfit, but great material. So you're going to enjoy this Zoom that's going to follow. But I did want to do some housekeeping up front. Number one, as of today, it's been announced officially, I can share with you, Absolute Sound gave Bach for Mac Product of the Year 2024 already. Tom Martin did an awesome video. You should go to Absolute Sound. Tom Martin, or whoever does the video editing, they did an exceptional job. I know what it takes. I don't have time to do those kind of editing tricks and stuff that they do. He did a perfect job. And it's a long video, but definitely worthwhile watching if you have not watched mine yet or watched it and want to get even more perspectives. But it brings up another point. I've been getting emails, and I've learned about this, obviously some forums on PS Audio or ASR talking about the Bach. I just don't have time to go to those. I'm not even registered on them. I can't contribute on them. I don't know what kind of good or bad information is on there. I know that I'm in my WhatsApp group all the time giving information, and there's more owners of Bach in there than any place on the planet, and including Edgar. So the best place to get information, guys, is in my WhatsApp group. It only costs $5, or if you order the Bach, you get automatic entry. You get so many other perks too. Let me just tell you real quick. You get discounts. We've done group buys, saving $400, $500, $600 sometimes on orders for people individually, guys. Then I can offer discounts on the Blue Jeans cable. I cannot offer any discounts anymore on the Bach. Even my best friends paid full price. The margins are just too tight. This is not one of these products that are marked up 40, 70%, all these ridiculous margins that you see in the industry. It's expensive, but there's a reason, because there's a lot of cost in these mics and all the hardware that goes into the box. So, especially R&D and support. So, I can't do discounts there, but you are going to get more than your money's worth in value for sure. Also, in my WhatsApp group, I'm going to start leveraging them for stuff I don't have time to do. I get asked all the time to do reviews of products. You've seen the quality of systems of people in my WhatsApp group. You see Dave, Doug, Michael, Pete the Greek. There's a lot of other guys you may not have even met yet. They have pedigree and acumen that are more than qualified to do reviews. So if you join my WhatsApp group, potentially you have the ability to be one of my outsourcers for reviews, again, if the company agrees to it. But I've at least vetted a lot of these guys. And so there's a lot of perks for being in the WhatsApp group. But the macro point is, if you want to get information about the Bach straight from users, people in beta for ORC. By the way, the Tom Martin video has nothing to do with ORC. He's still got to do that demo. Edgar's got that scheduled with him very soon. So yeah, it's going to be mind-boggling once he hears ORC with the Bach. And you will too, as soon as we get it at the show, hopefully at Expona. But if you want to get the scoop, you want to get as much information as you can, knowledge, watch that Tom Martin video, but also for the Bach, ORC, join the WhatsApp group, and you'll get plenty of comfort. Plus, you got the 14-day trial. Okay, enough of the housekeeping. Let's get to the Zoom today with Gilbert Yeung and why I did this project to begin with, because I tend to treat this channel like an episodic series and assume you've watched every single video. But just in case if you know why I did it, you can jump ahead to the Zoom. I've got a chapter. But if you don't, let me break it down for you. My subwoofer failed maybe in the summertime, SVS sub. I decided to donate it to my friend Doug, who replaced the amp and made it part of his swarm and installed it there. It worked great. And it gave me the opportunity to do something I always wanted to do. Make a passive sub, one that's not actively amplified. And because I've just had terrible experiences with plate amps, and other people I've talked to all have bad experiences with the onboard amps and subs. And it's not even confined to a brand. Velodyne was notorious for it being bad, and I had a Velodyne that failed. Mirage, Rel, SVS, JL Audio, you name it. And even Wilson Audio, Pete the Greek mentioned their Watchdog is now passive, but originally it had an amp. They gave up using amps internally on that. I don't know why it's been such a problem, But I said, I'm going to do a sealed box, passive, with acoustic elegance drivers, and I'm going to have a separate video on that aspect of the subwoofer build. Stay tuned for that. I'm just so far behind. But this is going to be on the amp, because I started thinking, I'll just do a normal amp and be good, done with it. Then I said, let's do something fun. And then Gilbert Yeung, who, if you don't know, you should watch my other videos on him. But real quick, a little brief background. He used to be Gilbert Yeung with Blue Circle Audio. And so if you've been in the hobby for a long time, you should definitely know who that is. And Blue Circle was well known, great products back in the day. And he would go to the shows a lot. And probably around 2018 or 19, I think, he shut that down. And then not reinvented himself. He just took the filters off of what, exposed really what his true personality was. He's now known as Angela Gilbert Yeung, kind of goes by both combined. And, I might make the mistake of misgendering him. He's totally cool. He's not offended by that. So you don't be offended for him. Okay, guys? He doesn't like people being offended for him, FYI. But in any case, great guy, fun. And we collaborated on a project to create this subwoofer amp, okay? And combining his use of silicone and creativity with my Western theme, and also at the time I was in Vegas watching you two at the Sphere, I said, let's make a sphere-shaped amp. And I don't want to spoil it because we talk about it more in the actual Zoom, but long story short, we collaborated on this one-of-a-kind amp, subwoofer amp. That also we decided to make into a stereo amp so I could put it on my mains. And not to be spoiler alert, eventually I'll do a formal review on it, but it sounds phenomenal, okay? This is a high-end amp. It's not just a gimmicky looking amp. This is a high-end amp. And what you're going to hear in this Zoom is some of the things he does that are high-end that you don't even see in the mega dollars, and why some of these mega dollar ones still do, cost-cutting things that aren't really bespoke. And he does modifications, actually. Bryston, Jeff Rowland, Name, all kinds of things he's done, and you can watch his channel for that information, as well as vintage receivers. But you're going to hear all of that on the Zoom. Just wanted to give you this little preface, catch you up, and I hope you enjoy. See you back here soon. Of all the hundreds of shows over the 40-plus years, probably I've been going to shows, or at least 30, you had one of the most memorable pieces when I saw the music pumps, the amplifiers that were made out of women's shoes, pumps. And I'll still remember that probably to the day I die, because I'd never seen something like that. And I thought it was cool, innovative, different. I never owned Blue Circle products back then, but definitely was intrigued. And then when I saw after COVID and you had kind of reformed and started doing public videos and stuff, that's when I kind of put two and two together that you were back around. And that's when I saw one of your videos. I think I even emailed you about potentially doing music pump amps for my subwoofer project. And then from there, we just kind of evolved the collaboration on what would be really cool, using your inspiration and your style with mine, and creating that really cool subwoofer amp. And I'll put up some pictures for people that haven't seen the final product, but that was a really cool both project to collaborate with you on. And then we also, while I was in Toronto, we went to the dealership there and got to see Interact Audio, where we got to see some of your current model stuff, which I understand has been getting really good reviews.
We have received a lot of good positive comments from user and from people that actually heard the product. And I back to the barbecue amp that I was remember that you were just looking for a subwoofer amp, and then all of a sudden one of the message saying like, or if a subwoofer amp is only mono amp, then and you were saying that if somebody say how's the amp sound, and then you message me say maybe we should make it a stereo amp.
Right.
And they asked me, can I put a mono stereo switch? And my answer was no. And then about half a day later, I said yes.
Right. And yeah, it wasn't as easy as just doing a bridged mode type amplifier. I know you were kind of contemplating how you were going to get this done the way you wanted to do it. And I'm so glad we did because yeah, we can leap forward to the barbecue amp in terms of I've been using it on my main speakers up until just last night. I finally hooked up my do-it-yourself sub, put it into mono mode, and it's driving those great. So yeah, I think that people may think it's cool and look at it from an aesthetic standpoint only. But I think that this Zoom, one of the things I wanted to do is share with people that it's not just a gimmicky looks-based amplifier. There's a lot of technology and design stuff that went into it that makes it a high-end amplifier. And in many respects, I would put it up against much more expensive amps and has certain features that I've noticed just in my short time with it that you don't even get in these mega dollar amps. One thing being the power supply, as cool as it is separate from the rest of the amp. And I see these monstrous chassis amps with basically a nuclear reactor inside, and everything is in one big chassis, which to me doesn't make much sense. Having those two separated probably has some performance advantages and a lot of other things that are very conducive to higher end than just jamming it all in a standard chassis or even some gimmicked out heat sink looking chassis. But also the other things I was noticing, you had the ground lift switch, which came in handy because without the ground lifted, I did have a hum, and that immediately got rid of it. You have the mono and stereo switch, which at first you had like 3 toggles that were required to turn it from stereo to mono and vice versa. But then you cleverly created a bar on it, and I almost thought I had to remove that when I saw it. I didn't realize what you had really done, and really just made one switch out of 3 dip switches. And so that was really cool. And then, of course, the insides. You believe in a lot of capacitance. We'll talk about that, but making them look like charcoals, and then the heat sink being the grill, and then you even gave me a little silicone steak to cook on there. It's still not done, still burning in, and so it's a very high-end amplifier from on a lot of measurements and metrics, other than just cool aesthetics. But maybe you could give some of the basics in terms of the power and what kind of those considerations that you had to go through to make it stereo versus mono and the purposes. We also talked about the driver I was going to be using, collaborating and custom designing an amp for this specific purpose, as well as for stereo purposes, was all part of the collaboration, not just aesthetics. But maybe you could talk a little bit more from your perspective how things went.
When we remember when we first started, we were looking at possible different kind of chassis. I I am doing a line of funky power amp that we're using surround sound broken surround sound receiver chassis that cannot be repaired. And I remember initially I was suggesting using that, but you said that you want something special. And then you start looking at the eBay and you keep asking me, can you do this? Can we do that? And then I thought about it. Yeah, I can. And we didn't really find a big enough chassis. So one of the reasons is we want a separate power supply because we couldn't find a big enough chassis. But like you said, the multi thousands and tens of thousands of amps that jam everything inside with big heat sink, fancy looking thing. From a pure performance point of view, a separate power supply is always better than everything jammed in one box. For residual noise, performance, and for a lot of interference because you don't have the transformer and you don't have the circuitry, high gain circuitry to pick up the noise from the transformer. But for convenience wise, I believe a lot of audiophiles just have trouble to accept that. And there are amps out there have separate power supply, but not that many. I remember way back in the 70s that Kenwood has the Japanese company Kenwood actually have a separate power supply for their high-end integrated amp, and that was just one of the very few high-end amps that actually have that features. But from the from my point of view, I always like separate power supply if it's possible, meaning if the customer or the potential buyer is able to accept it. From a performance point of view, it's always possible. So I'm glad that we actually decided more or less based on the physical dimension wise of the barbecue grill and the sphere that we decided to have separate power supply. And when you were thinking about custom amps, there is a lot of different factors. One of the factors is aesthetic of the amp, and you were saying about you want the sphere to kind of match your channel color. And
Right.
I thought that was a great idea because it kind of round. So I put a red, white, and blue to kind of match it. And doing a custom amp like this, or just anything else, is not a one point of view. That, of course, there's the performance point of view. There's also at least aesthetic point of view. So, and convenience point of view is also important. The practical installation. But in this case, we end up with something that end up really good performance wise, and I managed to get 65 watt in stereo and 135 watt in mono from that amp. And that switch, I have to do parallel and series configuration to put two channels together. I can just leave off all three toggle switch separate, but what happened if somebody just flip one and not the other? Bad thing can happen. And I remember you said that it's okay, you're not going to let anybody touch it. And from my point of view, as a creative point of view, designer point of view, I cannot rely on you are the only owner, you are the only user to use that amp. So I had to make it sort of foolproof.
Right. No, I'm glad you did. I'll never sell it though. So, and it's custom made for me. But yeah,
but what happened if your doggy climb up there and push the switch?
I
Yeah,
know.
ugly doggy.
Yeah.
So I have to make it somehow.
No, it's very clever. Yeah. I didn't realize why it needed 3 dip switches anyway to flip between stereo and mono, but it was a very clever way to do it. And so 65 watts stereo, 130 you said roughly mono.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the important thing is I'm using a acoustic now I'm drawing a blank of the name of the driver. But it's basically a very high impedance one. It can be easily driven with that 130 watts. A lot of times people get distorted views of how much wattage you need from a subwoofer amp. And these plate amps have kind of fake wattages. And I know you've probably even talked about this on your channel, how some of these specs aren't really applicable, or they're exaggerated, not very reliable. You're giving a true 130 watts that was designed for that driver as we shared the specs. And it works perfectly. I just measured it against my Rel 25, which has an onboard amp. It's a very expensive sub. They matched almost identical measurement-wise. Now, you do something a little bit unique, and I think this is worth talking about. You have less gain in your amp and put more gain in your preamp. And so that's atypical from what my other amps here were. So I had level matching I could easily do. It wasn't that big a difference. But maybe share your philosophy on why you do that.
With high gain power amp, in the traditional preamp, you turn the knob not too high and get the very loud sound, and then a lot of people will see that as a very powerful power amp. But the cons on that setup is the power amp is actually amplifying the residual noise from the preamp and the DA converter on the phono stage. So you will have a lot more system residual noise from the speaker. So the signal to noise ratio between the preamp and power amp is rather low, relatively low. But with a low gain power amp and high gain preamp, the power amp is not amplifying the residual noise of the preamp and the upstream from the upstream. So it has less residual noise at the speaker output. Okay. So the signal to noise ratio between the preamp and the power amp is actually higher. And we actually did a video on just that exact topic. But that's the basic idea that yes, you have to turn the volume control higher to get the same amount of volume, but the system residual noise is a lot lower. and also in the traditional mechanical volume control, the best part is always between 2 o'clock, 10 o'clock, and 2 o'clock. So with the lower gain power amp, it allows the user to turn up the volume control to the best part of the mechanical volume control. The digital volume control is not so much. It still have a little bit of noise issue at the way bottom, but the traditional mechanical volume control is best part of it is between 10 o'clock and 2 o'clock.
Yeah, and I guess you get more range of control with it as well as a byproduct, which is helpful. And also brings up a macro point that when you are buying an amplifier, sometimes people just worry about mating it to their speaker. It's also important to mate it to your preamp such that you get a preamp that has the gain, and why staying synergy within the same family of products is worthwhile. And that's why you make both preamps and amps that synergistically work together really well with the gain already matched. Don't try to outthink these designers. You know, another company similar to this is Ari Surratt, does the exact same thing. And people buy the Ari Surratt amp not knowing that they can't use their existing preamp without enough gain. So this is a more of a macro point, as well as don't try to overthink and outthink the designer. If you believe in them for your power amp, it's probably a good idea to use them for their preamp, and vice versa. Now, some make amps that are agnostic and preamps that are agnostic. But again, getting these little benefits of performance like you're talking about, and going with your philosophy is, if you're going to do it in one piece, you might as well do it in another, in my opinion. So it works really well. And to back up, I think let's talk about a little bit more of the inspiration behind, you talked about the colors. I know you were Blue Circle, so I'm normally a black and white guy. So initially I was going to suggest black and white as the color combo with the painting and the silicone. But you having the legacy of blue and always having Blue Circle, I think it was a cool collaboration. And to let people know that Power Supply Sphere, the way that came out, I was in Vegas at the time watching U2 in concert at the Sphere. And when I thought about doing this amp, and we were talking about even using an old slot machine as a potential chassis at one point, and that would have been a cool idea. But then I was at the Sphere and I was like, that would be cool to have a Sphere amplifier. We just couldn't find a Sphere that was big enough for all one chassis, but this outdoor planter type thing that was all metal and could have access made for a great idea, you said, for the power supply. And then we decided to do a barbecue pit, which already has some venting and conducive things for an amplifier where you want to dissipate heat. And it has the Texas theme that I'm used to. The Sphere, we put a cowboy hat on top of it, did my colors, almost looks like, and because there's actual cables delivering the power to the barbecue pit, it almost looks like a cowboy bringing a cow, because it's basically got 4 legs and cow painting splotches. It just really came out cool with the collaboration. Also, George, I think, added some suggestions in that vein too. So it's definitely a one of a kind aesthetically. I'm never going to sell it. It's so cool. Love it. Sounds great, performs great on both. And it's not even fully broken in, but yeah, certainly on the metrics that I value, it's got everything I want. But people that don't know, you do believe, and this is one of your hallmarks that, other than what we've already talked about, is a huge amount of capacitance. And so for people that haven't seen your videos and haven't seen my previous video with you, maybe real quick, share what you've learned and why you believe in that.
Capacitance is the backbone of the power supply. And back to the plate end that you were talking about, that some of those are fake power. It's not so much fake power. They can deliver that amount of power, but they never mention how long they can deliver. Some of the surround sound receiver, they claim they can deliver 150 watts, but they always never tell you how long. And sometimes a nanosecond, sometimes picosecond, sometimes it's just a peak of 150 watts, and they cannot deliver anything more than 60 watts. So they're not totally lying, but they kind of like pushing the limit. But without with our big power supply, it's almost like it's like power supply capacitance is like the amount of water in the water tower. So when you open the tap, water come out is like how loud the music come out. And if you have a little water tank to supply the water, you will just have a spurt, and that's done. But if you have a bigger water tower or even a big reservoir, it will just keep coming. And no matter how much power, how much music, how loud the music you play, it just keep coming. So in theory, there's no limit of how big the power supply. But in practice, in real life, we gotta look at the cost. We gotta look at the physical dimension of the chassis, how much we can fit in. Compare today. Let's for example, compare today's capacitor technology back in the 70s. In terms of cost per capacitor, per microfarad, it's almost 5 times less compared to 70s. And also the physical dimensions is at least 3 times smaller for the same amount of voltage and capacitance. So it allows me to make bigger and bigger power supplies, and with the cost not increasing as the capacity increased compared to 10 years ago. And my philosophy is power supplies also determined of how the amp sounds a lot, because the transistor, a lot of people talking about what kind of transistor to use, but the transistor is just water tap, the process. It's how the water going through the faucet. The transistor turn on and off like a faucet letting the water in and out. But without the proper amount of water, you can turn on the water tap, but nothing come out. So the quality of power supply and how the power supply can supply the demand is very important and have a lot of impact on how the sound quality.
Yeah, and I guess, correct me if I'm wrong, it also probably makes your products a little more immune to power delivery issues in your home, but voltage sags and stuff like that, because your reservoir, I guess, is better. I know your amps will play. It's almost like quasi battery power. We were in the dealership, and you had a power supply you had turned off earlier in the day, and we hooked it up, and it was still on. It could still turn on later in the day without any connection to the AC wall outlet. That was pretty amazing. So yeah, there's a lot of advantages there. And what's really cool, what you do, and you did it on my amp, you really haven't found, now there may be diminishing returns, but you've found that the more capacitance you add, you still can get some performance benefits. And so you have an upgrade path for people that want to add more down the road, try more, and not have to rebuy an amp, rebuy the chassis, rebuy dealer markup and distributor markup. You basically could just buy these packs from you to add capacitance, and you got a plug already on there. And that's a really cool way to continually upgrade your product and see what kind of differences you hear. And I know for me, I think I didn't have a lot of time with it at the dealership, but I think that extra reservoir that you're talking about lends to a more relaxed sound where transients and the music flow more naturally without having almost a hiccupy sound that in hindsight you never realized was there, but then you get this level of energy reservoir, and you probably notice it a little bit better. So I think it's a great way for a product to not only have great performance right out the gate, but also ways for you to upgrade it. And you do that on your current model stuff as well as your bespoke stuff. So that's something that people should really start paying attention to. But also want to talk about, on that same vein, you modify other people's stuff, not just the vintage stuff that we talked about in one of our videos, which is really cool. Some of these vintage receivers that you modify, cool looks. I still think they're awesome. And you can upgrade those with these capacitor packs and stuff. But you're also, I think I've seen where you've modified Jeff Rowland gear, Name, Bryston, and all that gear. So what's the process if people are interested in having you maybe modify or upgrade some of their existing equipment?
Usually when they contact me, the first thing I will ask them is, of course, the brand and the model. And I will take a look and see I can actually see any internal pictures online. If not, I will ask them to open a cover and take several internal pictures for me. And then I can decide whether I can do anything inside or we can only do the external capacitor pack. Most of the time, we can only do the outside because a lot of amps are almost fully packed. And the modification, like the Bryson modification, was a rewiring job because those the amp that we did, came from a theater, a real theater back in the back in the 70s, and they have those amps in the early 80s for 30 years, and they were completely used. And humidity and heat, a lot of the wire inside the Bryson amp was kind of hardened and brittle, so we have to replace the wires. And then since we have to replace the wire, so we might as well just solder the wire directly into the contact instead of going through the clip, because those clips are getting old and even the gold plated contact is getting a little tarnished and oxidized. So that's one of the modifications that we have done. There are modifications like the Yamaha integrated amp, the entry level Yamaha integrated amp, the AS301, 501, 801. So those actually have good bones. What I mean by good bones is they have good basic circuitry. Basic circuitry is actually better than complicated a lot of times. But what they have to make it to a price point, so they kind of rounded the corner here and there. So they have to meet the price point. With my knowledge on those amps, and I play with it a little bit and find out that if I can actually do this and do that, I can actually make those rounded corners sharp again. And by doing that, make that amp sing. Even at that price point, even at the 1,000 Canadian dollars price point, those amps it's worth a lot more than $1,000 after the mod.
Yeah, and they look great too. And so resurrecting things from the dead and having a cool vintage look and then modern performance, I think is something people should look at. And like I said, even if you have what is a very good brand name, whether it's Bryson, Jeff Rowland name, you've been able to find certain areas where your expertise and your history has shown where everything is built to a price point. Everything also ages. There's always things that you can modify, and these designers may have done things differently. So I think it's a cool project outside of the aesthetic side of things with you, to just have you upgrade the performance of certain products, especially these vintage pieces. Definitely, if I come across one, I'll be sending it your way. Do you have anything else are you working on, any big project or anything?
I am currently working on a new power amp. I don't, and I did a short video on the new power amp, just saying I designed a lot of things on paper up to a certain point, and after a certain point, you really have to try it, and mostly up to about 80-85%, and really have to try it and tweak it, and that's no amount of paperwork can actually tell you what happened until you actually tweak it and listen to it. And that's my project right now. I want to go back to the barbecue amp and the sphere. And have you noticed that the barbecue amp, there's a 4 legs, but they have blue hoof, silicone hoof?
Yes, they got blue booth. I'm looking at it right now.
Yep. And one of the reasons I did that, because I always like to put silicone feet on gear if possible, because it is a good mechanical isolation material. But on the other, on the second thing is that barbecue grill is not really designed for what we were trying to do, and because of the metal, they kind of, after the shipping, they kind of twist and turn a little bit, so the 4 legs are not even. So I decided actually just put silicone hoof on them and make it blue, and so now they are perfectly level. And I also did that for the sphere, and beside the mechanical vibration control, that metal sphere scratched my table. I didn't want to scratch your table. So silicone's perfect.
Yeah. It looks like little boots on the head. Yeah, it's pretty clever. And yeah, I mean, I did overlook that part. I mean, the barbecue grill can be closed and protected, but even if you take the hood open, you want to look at the insides because it's got a cool light. It's got the black capacitors looking like charcoal and the heat sink, but you pretty much protect anybody from accidentally touching anything as well with your liberal use of silicone in strategic areas such that it protects people from, you know, hurting themselves. But also in that same vein, we probably overlooked another hallmark of what makes your designs different and also performance wise is your unique soldering technique using almost like bus bars for, is it mainly the power supply capacitors that you're doing that to?
Mainly the power supply capacitance, and sometimes when the power amp is high power enough, sometimes I use the bus bar on the output speaker output.
Okay.
Yeah, and I when I do those soldering, usually at the minimum it's too cold to solder. Sometimes pre-coated. It depends on how big the solder joint I want to do. Because you cannot do just one layer of solder and then another time. Most if you do one layer of this big, they will just drip down. So you got to coat it on top and the top and build up because the solder have less conductivity than copper. So in order to able to conduct the same amount of current, that solder joint has to be bigger than the copper. Otherwise, you are creating a fuse because you got a bottleneck at the solder joint.
And that's something I think counterintuitively people think the opposite. They think the less amount of solder, the better. But you're talking at certain joints and angles where there's very little contact surface from the actual conductor. So you're providing a big amount of solder that doesn't, in a reverse situation like you talked about, could end up just acting as a fuse if you don't have enough. So that was very intriguing because it's not something I typically see or hear people advocate. And I know that you've been, and some of your dealers are very big advocates, as that's one of the big reasons why your amps sound as good as they do and some of the performance upgrades that you get. So wanted to make sure people knew about that little nuance that is quite sizable, I guess, in your estimation, because you do it quite a lot.
If I can go back to some people saying the smaller the solder joint, the better. In almost all theory, there is no one size fit all. In some case, I do agree the smaller the solder joint, the better. When it comes to small signal, the smaller the solder joint, the actually better. You don't want to put a 16 gauge wire to try to go through a phono stage. That would be detrimental. So if you want a small wire like a 24 gauge or even 26 gauge in a phono stage, tone arm wire usually 32 gauges. But when we're talking about the power supply to the power amp output stage, we want it as big as possible, at the same time not too big. On a preamp stage, you don't want too big a wire either. So the solder joint, the size of the solder joint has to match the bus bar or the wire that you're going to solder in. And one of the kind of amusement, funny point is there's several people that they said they can solder, and a couple people that they actually showed me that they are NASA certified solderer, and I politely declined the request to solder for me because as soon as I know you're NASA certified solderer, what is the main goal? The less payload as possible. That means the less solder to do the job adequately as possible. So they are trained to solder use as little solder as possible on any case, any possible case, because the payload is one of the most important things. If you cannot go over the weight, its weight is as little as possible, and still able to do the job adequately. So it's a different purpose of soldering for different way of soldering for different purpose.
No, and those are the nuances I like to see, and that's where experience number one. But people that know these nuances and not have knee-jerk dogmas. Oh, always the smallest solder joint. Looking at what application is it in the power supply capacitors or not? Preamp, phonostate. Like this is why you want to use people that have that in-depth knowledge to these level of nuances and their experiences versus people that just have knee-jerk dogmas and come to these conclusions that are generalizations that really don't apply when it's actually practiced for many years like you have. So yeah, it was so great to have this project with you and do and visit as well. We had a great time. You actually outdid me tonight with your hat and outfit. You know, I'm gonna have to step it up next time on the Zoom.
Oh, I told you I'm going to dress up for the occasion, but
I
you
know.
just kind of trying to
I
be
let you.
tame.
I let you carry this one this time. Next time I'll step it up. Actually, you're gonna want to watch when I go to Dallas next month. I got a whole custom grown outfit, never worn before, never seen before, custom hat. So
Boots,
I'm saving.
cowboy boots. I saw your cowboy boots being made.
Oh, you did? Yes. That's also going to be ready in time too. So yes, I will redeem myself in the near future, but definitely tonight you win the outfit award, and definitely appreciate you joining me and love the amp, love the project. This is a keeper forever, and I'm sure people. I'm gonna hook it up to them for them if they want to try it and let them know that basically the same performance you got here. That's what I wanted to ask you. Is the new amp you're working on, are they all going to be barbecue pit amps now? Is that what it is?
No, I don't get
No,
enough. I don't get
no.
enough barbecue grills.
I mean, I thought for sure this would go into production. I mean, seriously.
Well, you see the problem of going to barbecue grill put the barbecue grill production is I gotta make the sticks.
Oh, that's true. The steaks
Yeah, that
probably
stick
took
is
you.
yeah that stick is still at 20%
Well,
cooked.
next time you could put hot dogs. I forgot we could have done a hot dog on there too. But yeah,
Just give me 5 seconds.
okay. He's got a hot dog, I bet. There you go. I should have got that because this
I got a
steak is
hot
taking
dog.
forever. I just need to warm up that. This steak is taking forever. But yeah, it was super fun project, super fun meeting you, super fun hanging out. I know you're not going to the Montreal show. I think I'm going to go to that next month, but definitely plan to see you in Toronto. I'm sure we'll be in touch before that. If you ever have anything you want to talk about when you come out with that new amp, let's do another Zoom and showcase that and talk about it further. And yeah, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of comments on the videos, but you have your own channel, Angela Gilbert Yeung. There's also been a documentary on you. We didn't get into all your background, regurgitating a lot of that stuff that we talked about in my other video. So make sure you watch that if you haven't. But yeah, there's a documentary that I think was nominated for some awards. So very interesting guy. If you haven't already noticed, very knowledgeable guy. And the products speak for themselves, both on an aesthetic level and performance level. So thanks again for joining me, and I'm sure we'll do it again soon.
Thank you.